All right. So is it true that Guinness in Ireland is better than Guinness here?
Okay, how nerdy of an answer do you want? And I think that's what we're living through now, is we're in this vicious cycle where be it clicks or the algorithms or whatever it is rewarding kind of the more intensive sides of our political consciousness. And that's the thing that really needs to change. Inside the White House too, though, I've kind of used the metaphor before of you're almost like shipwreck survivors, where you went through this very intensive experience together, and then it's over.
Yeah.
And then you all go about your daily lives.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Capital Spotlight. Today we're here with John McCarthy, founder of Causeway Strategy Group. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit off the bat, what is Causeway Strategy? Before we go anywhere, what are you up to now?
So in the great tradition of Washington, what to do when your party loses power, I've started a consulting firm and I talk to people about what went wrong.
There you go.
It's just been a fun kind of opportunity to figure out what's next and help really smart people navigate DC during a complicated time.
Cool. One day, once I've really made it in life, I can't wait to be a consultant and just tell other people what to do. That sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's not that different than normal politics. I mean, I feel like if you're doing campaigns or if you're on the Hill, you spend a lot of time giving people advice. So this is just the flip side of that.
Very cool. Well, before we get into it, you recently took a trip to Ireland. Fill us in on that.
I did. I just got back. As a McCarthy, it's a total stereotype. I go to Ireland a couple times a year, but I just got back from the Steelers and Vikings game, which is kind of funny because I barely know sports to begin with. So all of my friends would joke that I would show up to the opening of an envelope, which is probably true. And knowing nothing about football, I was sat with all these Irish people who also don't know anything about football. It's part of the goal is the NFL trying to kind of spread the word about the game. And they would look to me and be like, what's happening right now? And I had zero clue.
The NFL is definitely not hiring you anytime soon.
But we got really into fourth downs, which I've since learned I don't think are even that good. So, but the whole crowd is really into every time a fourth down happened.
There you go. Yeah, the suspense.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. What else did you do on the trip? Any highlights for people if they're going to Ireland, which I am next year. So you got anywhere good?
Okay, so I think that everybody should have a side project, and I am basically an unofficial tour guide. So
very cool.
I have a very well documented of all of my trips to Ireland. So if you're ever looking for recommendations of where to go, I'm your guy.
Do you have one specific location, maybe not Dublin, that people should go to?
I always think that going up to Northern Ireland is really worth seeing too. Cliffs of Moher are great, but also just for people who love politics, Ireland is just a really interesting place politically and to study conflict and conflict resolution. With the troubles in Northern Ireland, it's a place where the community actually ended up being the ones who came together to solve things. I mean, it's not that uncommon that people can actually bridge divides before politicians can, and that was certainly the case there. So there are these amazing stories of just women from both sides of the conflict coming together and having teas in their living room and talking about how they could kind of get on with life. So it's a great place to kind of also just think about how we can all work together.
Very cool. So your Irish heritage is something that has definitely helped you politically too and in your career, but how did you kind of get interested in that world?
It's I wish I had some really more clever story to this probably, but it's something that my family was kind of always just, into. My relatives were in the Hibernians, which is the kind of fancy Irish Catholic club.
Gotcha.
That's not really all that fancy. So it's just been something that we've kind of always been involved in, and I love history, and I love politics, and the kind of Irish American community has a good intersection of both.
Very cool. Well, do you like Guinness?
Of course I like Guinness.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Although I'm really bad at that whole splitting the G thing. Do you know about this?
No.
Okay, so you're supposed to take a Guinness, and on an actual pint of Guinness, it says Guinness.
Yeah.
And in your first gulp, or I guess gulps plural, you're supposed to drink it down to split the G.
For sure.
I always overshoot it.
Oh,
it's better than the alternative, I suppose. Yeah.
At least you're not a wimp.
Exactly. So, but this is the thing now to do.
Okay, you get extra brownie points for going lower.
Yeah. It's better for their bottom line.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. All right. So is it true that Guinness in Ireland is better than Guinness here?
Okay. How nerdy of an answer do you want?
Super nerdy.
Okay, it's a political audience, so we'll go with nerdy. The reason that people say that is actually because Guinness is a beer that has really strict brand guidelines in terms of the cleanliness of the lines of their pipes.
Gotcha.
And there are just more people around in Ireland to enforce this than elsewhere.
Okay.
So the reason that Guinness tastes maybe slightly different, though I would really argue this is just something that people say, is because the people are just so intense about the cleanliness of their lines at bars.
Very cool.
So at the ones in the United States, it's just not always the case because there are fewer Guinness specialists running around checking those things.
Ah, interesting. Thank you for the nerdy answer.
But it could, maybe it gives an extra certain tang here. I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like you want that fresh.
I'm happy to go bar to bar with you in DC, and we
Yeah,
can test
you know,
Guinnesses.
that would be
I
some
have
really
recommendations
fun
of some of my
content.
favorites. So
Okay,
right here on Capitol Hill, the Dubliner, Kelly's Irish Times. I mean,
vibes. There
Yeah,
you go.
exactly.
Okay, yeah, I think we could do something.
Totally.
Like that. Let's
Next
come
time we'll
back.
do that there.
Yeah.
Happy to do
There
the
we
St.
go.
Patrick's Day edition.
Yeah, we need to do Michelle Dorothy, who's been on the show. We need to do a gin and tonic podcast with her, and we'll do a Guinness.
I've had
you.
gin and tonics with Michelle.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Yep.
There you go. Then maybe we can all have gin
Yeah,
and tonics,
exactly.
and then
That'd be my
chase it
other
with
drink.
Guinness.
There you go.
All right. I don't know if that's a good combo or not, but
It's not terrible.
well, I'll try it. So, tell us about how you got into politics. Where did your initial interest come from?
Yeah, it's something that I kind of always knew that I wanted to do. I mean, no one in my family is necessarily political, but the folks in my family were kind of always just involved in their community. My dad's a carpenter. And I remember when I was a kid going to the Union Hall around Election Day or for other things where politicians would kind of come and ask people for their vote, or we'd go out and knock doors, or I remember picket lines. And then my mom runs a senior center in our hometown, so you'd always see people kind of come through there. And ever since I was a kid, I always just thought, like, wow, that's something I kind of want to do. So that was kind of it. And then I got involved in politics by when I was 18. I ran to be chair of my local party.
Very cool.
So I have this kind of like long-standing thought that I think especially young people go out and they kind of join Young Democrats. And I always said, I don't want to be a Young Democrat, I'm just a Democrat. And I think that too often these groups are on the outside kind of like banging on the door of influence.
Yeah.
And instead, like, you should just like find a real seat at the table, right? And like negotiate that out for yourself.
that's cool.
So that's kind of how I got involved.
Very cool. So what was that like at 18, being in that kind of position? What was your role like?
So at that point, you're kind of in charge of building out the party apparatus locally. And I was involved at the county level. I was involved with the state party. And it was just a great way to learn the actual mechanics of campaigns, because when you're learning politics in a small town, you literally have the math in front of you. You can kind of project what turnout's going to be. You know how many people are in town. You know how many of them are likely voters. And you can kind of map out and you know exactly where they are. And if they haven't turned out to vote, you can knock on their door and say, we'd love to make sure that you go out on election day.
Yeah.
So for all of the kind of giant apparatus that has been built around politics, and I've worked on mayoral races and I've worked on presidentials, and really at the end of the day, it's all just still about knowing who your voters are and if they've turned out to vote.
There you go. So where are you from originally?
New Jersey, a little town called Keansburg.
Okay, Keansburg. What part in New Jersey?
Which is interesting because if you know the Congressman Keene, who's serving now, or
Okay.
Kane, his, I think it's his great uncle. His father was governor, and his father's uncle was this congressman who got my town their post office.
Very cool.
And that's why it's called Keansburg.
There you go. That creates a little
A
legacy.
lot of trivia
for
on this
sure.
podcast already. I mean,
Nice. So give us a review of New Jersey overall, like, 'cause I feel like from the outside, before I'd been to New Jersey, I had a lot of negative thoughts about what New Jersey was.
but you went and it changed it.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I also got to experience a New Jersey wedding, Italian wedding, which is just like mind blowing.
Yeah.
So
Irish weddings are more fun. I would argue the
yeah?
Italian weddings probably have better food.
yeah, all right. That makes sense.
Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country, so I wouldn't say that we're like dying for more people to come. But it is a great place, and it was an awesome place to grow up. I think you have like all the beauty of the beaches, but because of it being a small state, you could be at a great beach, and then 15 minutes later, you can be in like a beautiful wooded park.
Yeah.
And there's horses and golf, and there's all these things that you don't think of necessarily when you think of New Jersey. It also has like a world-class education system. It has like incredible innovations coming out of the state. And if you're a politics nerd like me, if you show up at a firehouse on a Tuesday, there is probably something to vote for. So it's a great state to learn politics
Nice.
too.
Yeah, I was so surprised because I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I just think of woods, right? Like
Where in Pennsylvania?
Pittsburgh area.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm just so used to that. And when you think of New Jersey, you don't think of how green it is and like how lush, but it's so similar to
It's a beautiful
Pennsylvania.
place.
Yeah, huge fan.
Yeah,
So,
Garden State.
There you go. All right. So when did you make it to DC?
I came to DC for college.
Okay.
So I went to Catholic U, studied politics and theology. So I am pretty useless for polite conversation.
Hey, just adding to the cog in the machine
Exactly.
of political science people in DC.
There you go. I threw in the religion piece just to kind of, further complicate it.
Yeah, I think that sets you out, like sets you apart a little bit. So
Yeah.
that works. So what was your first gig in DC politics?
I started, when I graduated college, I worked for myself. A friend and I started this program when we were in college called Future Civic Leaders. And the goal was actually to get students in lower income communities to come to Washington. We would bring them in for summer camps and teach them the skills that they needed for politics. I think that campaigns are really effective like outlets to teach soft skills.
Yeah.
You learn how to get up in front of a room and speak.
Yeah,
you learn
for
how to
sure.
build a coalition. You learn how to like think strategically about this like really big issue of like winning an election and breaking it down into really small pieces. So our thought was that like who would benefit more from a representative democracy than people who are on like the margins of society.
Yeah.
So that's what I did first.
Cool.
And then after that, I did that for like a year and a half or so, and then went to work for my hometown congressman, Frank Pallone.
Very cool. So going back a little bit, your roommate in college, you guys were on opposite sides of the aisle, but were able to work together on a lot of things.
Yes.
So tell us more about that.
I've always had this kind of like bipartisan streak in my life, but my best friend from college, I was the best man at his wedding. He was the head of the college Republicans when I was the head of the college Democrats.
Very cool.
And obviously it wasn't that long ago. I graduated in 2013. But it just also feels like now a lifetime away.
Yeah.
Because even, I go back to Catholic semi-frequently. And when I talk to students today, they always say that like, oh my God, I can't believe you were ever friends with the head of the college Republicans.
Yeah.
Just because of how different the political climate is. But we lived together all those years and did a lot of our programs together. And to this day, in the presidential campaigns that I've worked on, I've often kind of led programs like Republicans for Biden, Republicans for Hillary. Some of my closest friends are kind of like Mitt Romney, George Bush Republicans. So, it's never something that's been a roadblock for me. In fact, it makes life more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. It's more fun for conversation.
Totally.
Too, right?
There's no point in hanging out with people all day if they agree with you.
Yeah, it's a bunch of sycophants. It's like ChatGPT these days. Everything you do is perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Except with ChatGPT, it's always like the smartest kid in the classroom. Like they always just give you too much information.
Yeah.
It's not quite what I was looking for.
Yeah, fair enough. So you say you had this like bipartisan streak through you. Like, where do you think that came from?
Part of it is just the way that I was raised. Where I'm from in New Jersey is what is perceived as probably a pretty Republican county. I grew up in a Republican area inside of a Democratic state, which is interesting because in retrospect, there weren't a lot of people in front of me. I didn't have to wait my turn because there wasn't some sprawling Democratic apparatus yet.
Yeah,
so I got to be engaged pretty young.
That's cool.
By virtue of being in a Republican place. And I knew that, I went to a high school that probably a lot of the kids around me, their parents are pretty conservative. I was just always in that conversation and that kind of sparring from a young age. And I just always thought it was interesting. And again, it's a kind of fun way to go through life is I think I'm a naturally curious person. So asking people what they think and why they think it is something I've just always done since I was a kid.
Yeah, very cool. So what kind of takeaways could today's congressional staffers or people working in politics learn from you and your roommate of how to coexist and not share the same ideas and bounce off of that?
One of the things that I think that people writ large, I think, get wrong about the Hill that I always liked about the Hill is I can't speak for the members, but amongst the staff, people were pretty bipartisan. You were willing to kind of if you met someone, have a drink with them, hang out with them socially. It wasn't a place that was as siloed as people think that it is. I think that that's become increasingly harder.
Yeah.
I think that states who meet as congressional delegations with their chiefs tend to have better cooperation inside.
sure.
I think that is something that every state should be doing because when I was a chief, the Democratic chiefs would meet, the Republican chiefs would meet,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't often do those things together.
For sure.
So really it was the travel or committee work or things like that actually brought you together.
Yeah.
But in this environment where we live in, where media is so siloed, and honestly, all the trends are suggesting that people are moving into zip codes subconsciously that align with their politics already.
For sure.
We're sectioning ourselves off in a way that just is not going to be helpful writ large for our country. So the more that we can intentionally find ways to seek out people who disagree with us and kind of actually bring a real curiosity to it, the
sure.
better we will be. And it's funny because I think that most people would sit and say, oh, of course I'm curious about
Yeah.
other people. But they really aren't in a lot
Yeah.
of cases. I think so often we want to be right. We don't want to be curious.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real problem. And I think that we all need to get to be more comfortable with going places that kind of either scare us or make us uncomfortable, because that's what we're asking other people to do,
Sure.
right? If
Yeah.
I am this virtuous, sanctimonious Democrat and I think everybody should agree with me, like that's asking a lot of a Republican, right?
For sure.
So like, how could I be the type of person who doesn't bring that same curiosity to them and ask them to do what I'm doing, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so important. And it's better for your brain too to be curious and to not always be so closed-minded on everything. Like it helps your brain expand.
Totally.
So how did you kind of on the campaign side of things, working for like Republicans for Hillary and so on, like how did you bring that curiosity and appeal to people across the aisle to bring them over?
A lot of the work that I've done has always been on constituencies that the Democratic Party has perhaps, to say it diplomatically, not been the strongest with. So I did a lot of work with faith voters. I did Republicans. I've intentionally kind of worked a lot with like the moderate Democrats. Because to me, I think that that's just a space that we need to do a lot of work in. We can't be a party that just relies solely on turning out our base. Yep. Eventually, we need to tell people, hey, this is what we think, and we should convince you to vote for us.
For sure.
There aren't enough voters otherwise. So I've always just been really drawn to that space. And one of the things that I think the Democratic Party of today keeps running into this as an issue is the minute you've condescended to someone or the minute you've told someone or been dismissive of their views, like they're never going to vote for you, right? The minute that you come across as kind of like rude or uninterested, like you've just totally given up that person's like participation in your political party. So I think that like we have a tone and attitude problem that we need to change as a party, because when you meet with people, I always say like if you kind of just like ask them a couple questions about themselves, they're pretty thrilled that you've engaged.
Yeah.
And then the thing that I always hear is like, wow, no one's ever asked me that before. Yeah. And then you've started a conversation and they might come along. And if they don't come along, you know, they still probably like you more than they did when you started.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's something that both sides really need to kind of get their act together on.
Yeah, I think both sides just preach at everybody so much too. It's like,
and I mean, that's what like every poll continues to show, right? It's not that people particularly love Democrats or love Republicans. In any given election, they just kind of dislike one of them more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been the last three presidentials, right?
Yeah. And the scary thing is for a lot of people who are in their 20s or 30s that are maybe going into Capitol Hill now, like that's the only politics that they know. Is this kind of like politics of like a, you know, second best option. And like that is not what politics is supposed to be. It's supposed to be aspirational. It's supposed to be like the name of like what we give to the thing that we decide to do together.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that like until we can kind of get back to that aspirational nature, we're going to kind of keep being in this really dark cycle.
Yeah, I think the rally around the flag thing is just, it's so hard to capture these days of, okay, let's not focus on tribalism of Republican Democrat, but like we are all Americans, and it seems difficult for people to rally behind that. And maybe it's because they have two different visions of what America should be at this point, and so they don't necessarily view the other side as American when thinking about that. But I'd love to figure out some of those things that like we can all rally behind and like fight together on.
Yeah, and I do think that like for the listeners, you know, to your program here, I think that all of the people who are engaged in this work like need to recognize that it is also on them to be the ambassadors of that kind of idea. Yeah. Because, you know, again, I started this out by saying I don't know sports, so I'm going to use a sports metaphor. But I always say that there's almost a difference between being a fan and a player. And if you're someone who's a political operative or you're a public servant in some way, consider yourself the player.
Yeah,
and you should be able to look at the other side and say, okay, like that was clever. This is smart. That person's well-intentioned. And if you're a fan, you can be a bit fanatic on the outside, but the energy comes from the people who are actually doing the thing.
Absolutely.
So like that's why the people in these jobs need to take their responsibility seriously to kind of be like men and women of goodwill here.
We're the ones on the inside. We are the people at the top of the political ladder. We are the political leaders. If we don't show the general electorate how to act as political leaders, how are we supposed to expect them to be constructive in how they talk about politics?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And when you behave that way, you know, it sends a ripple effect, hopefully, into the broader system.
Yeah,
and when you behave like someone who is an extremist, that also sends a ripple effect through the system. And I think like that's what we're living through now, is we're in this vicious cycle where be it clicks or the algorithms or whatever it is rewarding kind of the more intensive sides of our political consciousness. And like that's the thing that really needs to change.
Yeah. Are you an independent media guy?
Like as in
Substack
like do I
or like YouTube shows or
I still read a physical paper.
Oh yeah?
I'm not a podcast guy.
Okay.
And I love long form magazines.
Okay.
But one of my favorite questions to people is like, what kind of information do you consume?
Yeah.
I read the New York Times, I read the Financial Times, and I read the Wall Street Journal.
Gotcha.
And my favorite magazines are The Economist, Foreign Policy, and New Yorker.
Cool. There you go. Yeah.
And I'm a big newsletter guy.
Okay.
Like I obviously love Punchbowl and Playbook. I read all of their products. I also love Puck, which I think is like a really interesting coverage of, and it's amazing because they cover other different verticals. So I think sometimes in DC, we think that we're the only game in town. So it's nice to be able to read about like what's happening in Silicon Valley, what's happening in Wall Street, and remember that we're part of a much bigger ecosystem. Yeah,
for sure. I think we've even done polling on which newsletter staffers like the most, and some of those newsletters that are more broad appeal and focus on different sectors oftentimes aren't very interesting to congressional staffers. And so it's like the ones that are so DC centric and the Hill is the only thing that matters are always the ones that are most read.
I'm ridiculously not a practice what you preach person, because like I would sit and say like you should get up and read something that makes you like more well-rounded, but I am like such a political junkie.
For sure, yeah.
But aspirationally, I said this when I left the White House, I was like, I really need to learn a hobby, because like I need to do something else with my life.
I think we could all learn
because I love those
one.
people who are like, oh, like they're like amazing at their job, and then you find out, oh, actually they're like a world-class figure skater too.
Yeah,
I'm really not good at anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Do you know Yuri Beckelman?
Yeah.
So like does beer on the side or
Yeah,
creates
totally.
beer. Like, you know, you need something like that.
I tried making my own beer once.
Yeah.
And then it's fun for like 5 minutes. You like make it and then you put it in the kind of container and then it sits for a couple weeks. It was easier just to buy better beer.
Yeah, fair enough.
So,
all right, not a do-it-yourself guy on beer.
Not on beer.
That's okay. That's not one I would mess with either. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your resume. Like, what was your career trajectory in DC politics?
I've been on and off of Capitol Hill and presidential campaigns, and then the last couple of years at the administration. So, I kind of think that I sit at an interesting intersection where I think a lot of people are Hill people or administration people or campaign people. I've been very lucky to get to do all of them. The thing that I always give as advice to young people when they're thinking about like which of those tracks to take, I really believe that everyone should go do a campaign.
Yep.
You will just learn so much about yourself in a way that you don't often learn in those other circumstances. I kind of like laugh at the people who get to start their career at the White House. Like when these 20-year-olds started there, I'm like, oh my God, like this is the mountaintop, you know, like
it's all
everyone takes your
here.
call. Like it's just a whole different world. But campaigns, I mean, those are scrappy jobs and they're really worth doing. So
working on a presidential, give us a peek behind that curtain.
So I started with President Biden's campaign pre-launch. I agreed to come on, and at that time I was working on like congressional engagement, and then eventually joined as his deputy national political director, which basically means that you work with state and local elected officials, outside groups, unions, to kind of build the coalition of support. At that time, it was like a very diluted Democratic field. Like a lot of people were running for president,
for sure.
And I think we'll probably see that again in 2028. So the good thing about that is like, and why I would encourage everyone to go jump on one of these campaigns next time is because the field is so crowded, like everything matters. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were times where like a former councilman from 10 years ago in New Hampshire would endorse. And I mean, we would drop that press release as if like it was like Bono, because like it could really just like make the difference. And like you were fighting like tooth and nail for everything.
For sure.
By the time you hit a general election on a presidential campaign, it's just so different. Yeah. It's so big, it's so sprawling. But I mean, in those early days of the campaign, like you're sitting there like with the candidate. And like it is a small ragtag team of people who like deeply believe in someone and their vision. So like it is this like it is a great romantic experience that like people should just absolutely go do. And you end up in really insane circumstances.
I can imagine.
I mean, you end up when we were going through in New Hampshire. I remember people would say to me, "Oh, well, I've known Joe Biden all these years. You know, he used to, visit me in my kitchen. You know, could he come back over?" And now he's the former vice president. He's the nominee. But people just are so used to in those states,
for sure.
like that kind of like personal experience with candidates. So it is how democracy ought to work.
That's very cool. So, all right, what are your predictions for 2028 on the Democratic side?
On the Democratic side, I think that 20 plus people will probably run.
Yeah,
so I think it's going to be a really crowded field. And I think that's for the best. I think we're about to see a massive generational shift in the Democratic Party, both in terms of the talent, who's like actually running the campaigns, and the candidates themselves. And I think that's great. I think that the Democratic Party is stronger when we have, room for everyone from the kind of like far left to the center to the kind of more conservative Democrats, because at our best, we are a Big Tent party. And I think that the sooner these people run, the better. Because as we look towards the midterm, like right now, I think the Democratic brand is not one that is perceived as being helpful. I don't think that there are a lot of people running around saying like, I'm a Democrat, and has it benefit them positively. So I think we need to change that, and we change that by new leaders. People are, sitting and saying, who's leader of the party? What's the new message? But this will change as the kind of new face of the party takes shape. Yeah. So I think that should happen sooner rather than later. I think that right now, our governors are just all rock stars. Any single one of the Democratic governors in this country right now would make a phenomenal president. They've demonstrated really good governance in their states. They kind of come from a position of getting things done. They're largely kind of more in the centrist ilk that I think we should be in. So I think the governors are really exciting.
Anyone's in particular?
I love Governor Newsom. I love Governor Pritzker. I love Governor Walz. I love Governor Moore, and my home state Governor Murphy. But I do think that there's an interesting divide amongst the governors right now, where you do see these governors like Newsom and Pritzker who are really pushing back on the current administration. Yeah. And I think that that's really getting Democrats excited about these are people who are fighting. The way they're doing it really matters. I think that people perceive my party as being pretty lethargic and aged and kind of, not the most active in doing things. So I think that that's changing the party. I don't know that that's going to be the answer to what we ultimately need. I mean, I remember when we were having this conversation back in 2017 and 2018, and everyone then was talking about the need for new generational talent in the Democratic Party. And then by the time we got to 2020, with just the way the world had changed, people were like, we want steady, we want, classical politician, we want Joe Biden. Yeah. So it's just too far away to kind of know. But the good news is our bench is wonderful.
Yeah, I do think Newsom is a great politician, and even having Charlie Kirk on the podcast and kind of duking it out with him and saying hey, this is where the Democratic Party went wrong. I think this is what we could be doing better. It just seemed, obviously he's positioning for a run, but I really do appreciate his willingness to do those type of conversations where I think a lot of other people run from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think two things on that. Democrats need to go where there are people listening, writ large. Yeah. And I think that people need to go where people don't agree with us. Because again, I do not think that there are enough voters out there who just agree with us 100% of the time. There's not enough of them to win elections. So at a certain point, we need to bring people over to our side too. And then you only do that by showing up.
Yeah. Who are you most worried about on the Republican side in 28? Who has the best shot?
It's not a cop-out answer to say that I don't know. If I were giving advice to the Republicans, I would say that you probably want to find someone in the sweet spot who can turn the page on what is seen as the kind of more extremist parts of the party today, while also being able to bring back some of the voters who are your Bush and Romney Republicans who have kind of drifted away since. I think that there's a tension that exists between some of the kind of perhaps more inflammatory tactics of the Republican Party of the moment. And I think that there's just a large swath of centrist independent voters in this country who are turned off by that. So they need to kind of walk the delicate dance of being able to keep that part of the base that's energized by that with them, while also trying to bring back some of the people who might have left in the last few years. Democrats have the inverse problem, right? We are trying to hold together a coalition that wants to see us kind of, really holding the current administration to account. And then I think that there's a lot of people who lean our way who are sitting and saying, enough is enough, it's time to turn the page. I mean, that's really where I think most voters are at the moment. Is we can't be in this vicious cycle where every 4 years whoever comes to power seeks retribution. That doesn't end well, right? And I think that there is a clear lane on one side of the party. Democrats could come up with it, Republicans could come up with it, but there's a clear lane somewhere for someone to sit and say, I'm going to present a path forward. And that's what I think people are looking for.
Yeah, for sure. It's time to focus on vision of the future. Yeah. I think J.D. Vance interests me because the Walz-Vance debate was so cordial and intellectual that he's interesting because he's able to carry kind of the MAGA torch while also still being very conciliatory, which it's very different from Trump on that sense. So
maybe the answer is to run Midwesterners versus a New Yorker and someone from California.
Agreed. I like that. Only Midwesterners now on.
Yeah, debates could be a lot nicer.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your time in the White House.
Yeah, so I was there on the very first day, all the way through to the very last. Jeez. And the average length of time at the White House is 9 months.
That makes sense.
it's funny now because, I'm 9 months out of it. And I still there are days where I'm like, oh my God, I feel so much better than when I left. You just don't realize how inhuman the hours are and the kind of working conditions. I will say I loved working for President Biden. I believe so strongly in public service. And it's funny because if you even just look at the people who are serving now, it'd be hard to find someone who could really sit and say, I've served 50 years, basically, of my life, 30 years in the Senate, a vice president for 2 terms, and a president. Yeah. There's just not a lot of people who would even have the longevity to be able to do that. So I do think he was just a remarkable person throughout his time in public service and is now trying to find meaningful ways to give back in his post-presidency, too. So I showed up every single day because I believed in him. And getting to work at the White House is just a unique and special opportunity. I mean, the hours are brutal. Yeah. I mean, you arrive when it's dark and you leave when it's dark.
Oh, yeah. Even in the summer.
When we finished in January, I really didn't even know where the grocery stores in my neighborhood were because I never went to my grocery stores because you're just at work all of the time. Jeez. I mean, on Saturdays you work like a nice 9 to 5, and every other day you're there at like 6:37 in the morning and you leave at 7:30, 8 at night on a good night. But the days pass by really quickly because just everything kind of ends up there. And the thing that I think is so missed when people talk about the White House, no matter who the occupants are, by and large, people are there because they believe they can make a difference. Yeah. Like one day in that building or one day as president, you can do more than in almost any other job. So I think that, with some exceptions, I'm sure, the people who end up there just really want to be of service.
Yeah, I think that's like such a misconception in politics too, is we get these ideas that everyone is nefarious in their actions, and obviously there are people that are pulling the strings a little bit or have like dark intentions, but for the most part, people go to the Hill or go to the White House to pursue their vision for what they think is best for America. And totally. Maybe you don't agree with that, but like most people aren't evil in that intention.
Yeah. I mean, in having worked on the Hill, the White House, and campaigns, there have been very few people I've come across where I'm like, wow, they're in this for the wrong reason. By and large, everyone's just here because they really think that they can do some good. And again, that comes back to the curiosity. Whenever I find people who I have friends in the Trump administration, and when I've talked to them, we have that kind of common bond of we both served at a place that we really respect, right? And when I've tried to open up the conversation in that way, they've been, receptive because it wasn't a combative posture. Right. I think that there are people on both sides who would be uncomfortable with the fact that those conversations even occur. Yeah. And that's the part of politics that I think we need to kind of sit and say, like, no, that's the problem here, not the kind of dialogue in between.
So most of the people listening understand how the Hill works, right? There might be a Hill staffer right now or former. So tell us a little bit about the difference between the White House and Capitol Hill. But first, also like the community side of it. If you're at work all day long, you're eating your meals there, obviously you become super tight with the people that you work with. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think from like a workplace culture perspective, they're so different. I thought the Hill was one of the best places I ever got to work because people were so open and fun. And by and large, everyone's pretty young. I mean, it's just kind of, it's a cool place to work when you're younger. And the reason I think it works just from like a structural perspective is if you want to become a chief of staff and there's not an opportunity in your office, you know that you have to move to a different office, right? And there's 435 opportunities to go do that. So you're always nice to everyone around you because you never know where you're going to have to move next, right? Yeah. So like you're part of this broader community where there's lots of upward mobility. At the White House, there's only one person in that chair, and that's it. Yeah. So the tough thing is, I think it's a place where people have much sharper elbows, and information is a much more tightly held resource. Gotcha. People don't want to be as open and communicative as they do on the Hill because it's just a different kind of information currency. Yeah, I feel you. So I do think that part's pretty tough. I would say when I was at the White House, I ate at my desk almost every day because there's really not time for fun communal lunches. The hours are just a bit tougher there. Yeah. But those are kind of the main differences. Inside the White House too, though, I think that you do leave with just a I've kind of used the metaphor before of like you're almost like shipwreck survivors where you went through this like very intensive experience together and then it's over. Yeah. And then you all go about your daily lives. Yeah. And like there were people who I went from seeing 12 hours a day for 4 years that now I've seen like once in the last 9 months.
Yeah, that's wild.
but you'll always be able to revert back to this really incredible experience. So it's just kind of different in that way.
If you had to choose one vertical that you could only do the rest of your life, campaigns, the Hill, or the White House, which are you picking?
Campaigns.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I always loved the kind of phrase that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose.
Okay.
And I do think that right now the country could use a little more poetry. I think that we are at a place where people are sitting and looking for leadership that points them towards being on a common project. People don't feel like we're part of the same country anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
Like people are looking for someone who can inspire that again.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not going to come out of a, with all due respect, congressional hearing. It's probably going to come out of a leader who has the backbone to stand up and says like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, that's the rally around the flag thing is like, let's figure out what we can do together.
Yeah.
And so someone needs to paint that vision for us. I think that's why JFK was so great, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, obviously I'm a Democrat and I'm an Irish Catholic Democrat, so any quote with JFK is good for me. But I always think that one of like my favorite political speeches is Ronald Reagan's farewell address to the nation,
for sure.
where he talks about when you're sitting at the kitchen table, and if you're a kid, you should ask your parents about like what it means to be an American.
Yeah.
And if they don't have an answer, press them on it. And like that'd be a very American thing to do. And I mean, that era, right, I think was just a really good one for trying to instill a sense of like common patriotism and common project. So, you know, that's a message and messenger that I think a lot of politicians today should actually look back to.
Yeah, absolutely. So who are you outside politics? As we wrap up, like, what else do you want people to know about you? So if they want to reach out for a coffee, what are they going to connect on?
They can reach out anytime. I am like a firm believer of like the cold email.
Cool.
When I was a like college student, I would literally I'm an avid reader, both of newspapers, books. Anytime I would read something I'd like, I would find the reporter's email and just write to them and say, hey, I think this is really clever. Can I have coffee with you to talk about it?
Nice.
So I'm a firm believer that like one of the good things about choosing public service as a career vocation is that by and large people want to help, so they'll help you.
For sure.
So feel free to reach out. What else to talk about? I read a ton, so I'm always happy to give book recs, and I also play piano. When I first went to college, I was under the assumption that I would probably start with piano being my main thing, and then quickly obviously pivoted to politics. But I still do that as a nice party trick.
Very cool.
I always say, though, if you hear me at like 11 o'clock at night, you're like, wow, he's really good. If you've had a couple drinks. If you hear me at 11 o'clock in the morning, it's like, oh, he's learning piano. So it's a little different. But to tie it back to Jersey, I was the piano player for JWoww's wedding from the Jersey Shore.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even know
if you wanted that
was
nice
a Jersey Shore person.
JWoww, really?
No.
Oh, my God. You've missed the Jersey Shore. Come on. It's still the best show on MTV.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're going to follow up with at least Guinness reviews, if not another podcast with Guinness.
Anytime. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for tuning into Capital Spotlight Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe to our channels to stay updated on new releases, share the show with your friends, and rate the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. For more from Connect, subscribe to our daily newsletters, follow us on social media, and check out our website, all at Capital Connect, capital with an O, CNCT. See you next time.